Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Kyle Henderson, BamaInsider.com, coming to you with our special guest this week, previewing the New Mexico State Aggies. We got Jason Groves from Las Cruces Sun News. What's up, Jason? How you been, man?
Good, man. Good to talk to you, Kyle.
You know what? Jason and I go way back. I mean, Jason saw me covering high school football. That's where we first ran into each other, and I miss covering football in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So let me set the backdrop real quick. Las Cruces, New Mexico, yes, it's part of the United States of America, and it's close to El Paso, Texas, but they got some great high school football there. In fact, they have Las Cruces and Mayfield, two rivals that play high school football, and when they play each other, they usually get like 25,000. So big high school football, and but today we're talking New Mexico State and Alabama.
Hold on a second. Kyle, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you. I keep following you. I'm proud of what you've done. But I was trying to think how many New Mexico players come out of to go to a Division I school in a good year, 4 or 5 or something. And is that what you say? And now you're covering all these 5 stars, Alabama, the best country, one of the best programs in the country. Just proud of you, man.
Thanks, man. It's interesting to track. As I look back on my career, it was a couple years ago. I was covering Rio Rancho in Las Cruces in a high school football championship, and the next year, literally, I'm watching Tua Tagovailoa throw the game-winning touchdown pass to Devontae Smith on the sidelines at the Mercedes Stadium. So, talk about an accelerated career. However, I covered New Mexico high school sports for 10 years. You saw me. I did it. It was a one-man show, right?
You grinded, man. So you deserve everything you get.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm extremely grateful to be in this position, and you're right. Every single day, and I've said this plenty of times before to our listeners and our followers, is any time that I'm here in Alabama, I'm in Tuscaloosa, and I'm walking outside the Malmore Complex or the Bryant-Denny Stadium, I don't take it for granted. It's not just a thing that just comes and goes. I really understand where I'm at, what I'm doing, and how hard I had to get here, because it wasn't just this job just floated on top of me. I had to work for every single inch.
Yeah, and, man. You were the guy in high school football, and I say that as a newspaper reporter. You were the guy you were a go-to guy. So, like I said, man, you deserve everything you get out there.
No, I appreciate it. So today we are talking Alabama and New Mexico State, and also what's crazy. So before we get into this this exciting matchup, right? I went to school in New Mexico State, and I graduated from there, and everyone's giving me a tough time on the message board, and they're like the Fighting Kyles, the Aggies and whatnot. So it's awesome. So I will say though, head to head, it's going to be tough for Tuscaloosa to match up with Las Cruces food wise, because there's no place like Andales, there's no place like Chachi's out here in Tuscaloosa, but the food is pretty good. But Las Cruces has you beat Tuscaloosa. Alabama is a 54.5 favorite. The last I saw last week, New Mexico State went up and got thumped by Washington State and Mike Leach. Jason, it is what it is. This is a mismatch. It's call it what it is. And New Mexico State, the giant underdog. I saw on ESPN, actually, they have literally a 0.1% chance predicted to win this game. What was the good, if any, that came away from New Mexico State's opener against Washington State last weekend?
So I will say that I wanted to see how the quarterback, he's a redshirt sophomore, his name's Josh Adkins. I wanted to see how he improved. He kind of got thrown into the fire last year as a starter 4 weeks in, as a redshirt freshman. So I wanted to see how he improved. He looked better in spring and in the fall, but until it was live, I just wanted to see. And he played well. There was two tip kind of interceptions that weren't really his fault when it was already kind of garbage time. But he moved the ball up and down the field for at least the Aggies' first 3 possessions. So I think that as the year goes by and they start playing teams that maybe they're on more even playing field with, I'm looking forward to seeing how he can move the football team, because their offensive line did better than I thought they would, and Adkins looked like he improved. So I do think that the offense will be able to score points against competition on their schedule this year. I was worried about the offensive line. Like I said, they had 3-year starter tackle out for the game. Washington State did eventually adjust and did get some pressure on Atkins, but for the most part they held up. So those two things were encouraging from an offensive standpoint, because I really didn't know what to expect going into this season with Josh's first full year and 3 new starters on the offense.
You're listening to Jason Groves, the Las Cruces Sun News. My name is Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com. We're breaking down Alabama and New Mexico State, which will be at 3 p.m. from Bryant-Denny Stadium. It'll be Alabama's first home game of many home games this season. Last week, New Mexico State lost to Washington State 58-7. Josh Atkins was 28 for 42 passing, 221 yards with 2 interceptions. Jason, O.J. Clark and Tony Nicholson combined for 14 receptions last weekend. Alabama certainly needs to improve obviously this team is searching for perfection. Josh Jobe last week for Alabama struggled, had 2 pass interference calls. Any of these wide receivers going to give him some work this coming Saturday?
OJ is a smaller receiver, kind of inside guy, so he's not like once he catches the ball, there's a couple times he got tackled right when he catches the ball short of the chains. But Tony Nicholson, he's a grad transfer from Baylor. He's not a tall target, but he does have some speed on the outside. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. He won't be afraid of the moment or not. He did get some snaps at Baylor, so I think they're expecting a lot from him this year. I would say that of those 2 that you mentioned, Tony Nicholson, I think as the year goes on, will be kind of a go-to receiver for the Aggies.
What has been Doug Martin's message going into this weekend, taking on Alabama? I mean, we talked about it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, coming off playing Mike Leach, now you're playing Nick Saban. What's been his message going into week 2?
Well, the first thing when they play games like this is to stay healthy. They don't want to get any injuries. But they have been saying, and Doug has been on Twitter in the off season, he doesn't mind playing these guarantee games, but they do play 3 of them this year in his defense, and that's asking an awful lot when you go to Washington State and then go to Alabama, and then they play Ole Miss later on this season. So they need the money from these games, but it obviously, as a football coach, it puts you in a pretty tough spot. So I think that they just want to try to incrementally get better. I think everyone that makes the trip will play because they want to, like I said, avoid injuries. And there's definitely a lot to work on, but how much you can improve against a team like Alabama, who's just it's like playing a different sport to me. There's nothing in common with these 2 teams. So I think they just want to see some things on film and get out healthy and try to get ready for a more competitive game next week against San Diego State.
Yeah, I think if anything these 2 have in common, it might be the colors, right? I mean, kind of that crimson
right.
and white. So let's get to payment wise. I mean, what are the specifics that New Mexico State is being paid for this game against Alabama?
I think it was $1.6 million in the contract.
1.6.
If I remember.
Yeah, I think it's 1.6, and then in 2 more seasons, I think it's 1.9 when they come up again. And then what were they paid against Washington State?
Well, the that game was kind of a rushed contract when they filled out their independent schedule, so it was only $600,000, and then Ole Miss is, I believe, $1.3 million later on this season.
Okay, so New Mexico State Aggies, they're catching up, or at least trying to.
At least $4 million, and they had a rough budget year. Their budget is minuscule compared to Alabama's, I'm sure, but it's half of what New Mexico's is. So they're kind of. This is one of the main sources of revenue that they have that's not university subsidized. So it's kind of a necessary evil, but unfortunately, like I said, it puts the football coach in a bind.
Now, for those in SEC country that have no idea about New Mexico State or New Mexico or anything like that, Jason, kind of paint the picture about New Mexico State football. I mean, let's start out with a typical capacity for a football game. I mean, because people over here are used to seeing 100,000 people at a game, and obviously that's not the case in New Mexico State. What's a typical attendance for a home game? Do we have those numbers from last year?
Well, it's kind of skewed, Kyle, because as you know, they play two their two rivals or whatever are New Mexico and UTEP, and they play one of those games at home. And those crowds are typically pretty good. Their stadium holds 30,000, and maybe you get 25,000 for those games. And then depending on how they do for the rest of the season, by November, I mean, attendance will dwindle to like maybe 5,000 or 6,000 in the stadium. So that's kind of like depending on how they go. I'd say that the average maybe 10,000 people throughout the course of the season.
That's unbelievable. I mean, if the Alabama student section, get this, is like 31,000 strong. 31,000 strong. Also, New Mexico State, just a couple years ago, reached a bowl game for the first time in how many years was it? Was it 57 years?
57 years, yeah.
57 years. And this was the crazy thing. So that same season, I was in New Orleans because Alabama was playing Clemson, right, in the Sugar Bowl.
Okay.
So I was watching this football game. I had snuck away. I wanted just to watch the New Mexico State Aggies, a big deal, right? 57 years. So I snuck away to Drago's Restaurant in New Orleans. And if you've been to New Orleans before, I'm sure many of our listeners or followers have been there. They have the best charboiled oysters in the entire world. I mean, it's ridiculous. They give you this huge platter. You get a big piece of French bread. So I'm there. I'm having some drinks. I'm enjoying myself. And the Aggies are playing the Utah State Aggies, right? This is like the Aggies versus the Aggies. It was crazy. The game goes into overtime, and New Mexico State pulls it out in Tucson. And it was magical. I mean, what has the program?
Were you the only person in the bar watching that particular game?
So I was telling everybody. So I started to make friends, and by the end of the game, I'm buying shots for people. We're cheering. A tears rolling down my eye. It's like it was magical because
it was a big deal for people. Obviously, Tucson's pretty close to this area, so I'd say 2/3 of the stadium was NMSU fans, and like you said, like I met a lot of people like yourself in Tucson, former players that I hadn't thought of for years were there. Like it was a big deal for this community, and it's not like it's not a they definitely have increased the talent, but that was a special year for them.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you come over here to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and it's like, if you don't win the national championship, the season's a waste. So I came from, my point is, I've been in two different spectrums. I've been alongside a program that, had never even sniffed a bowl game. Winning 3 or 4 games was something that, was maybe monumental, honestly. And they went to a bowl game a couple seasons ago, and where this program is a perennial power. I mean, you look at the roster this year, Jason, there could be 16, 17 players that go to the 2020 NFL draft. And, a 5-star goes out, another guy steps in. And I know Nick Saban's always talking about depth, but I mean, these guys have incredible depth, and it's just amazing to see the talent. But with that said, these guys are the work that these guys put in. For example, let's take Jerry Jeudy, right? Last week, 10 receptions, 137 yards against Duke. Is he just naturally talented? Yes. But the offseason regimen that he puts himself through, how he focuses, how he keeps his psychological disposition coming into his junior season is really remarkable. So you got, not only is he physically just talented, he's also working to be the best in college football. And so I think that's going to be a reason you see him, Tua Tagovailoa, standing at the Heisman podium later on this season. So these guys certainly put in the work. They got great coaches, and it is what it is. But I'm interested to see some of my friends coming up. I'm good friends with James Hall, who's the associate athletic director out there. I watched his 2 boys play at Las Cruces High School. My pops is coming up to watch the game.
Okay,
so
good.
It's it'll be what it is. But New Mexico State, there's certainly hopefully they can come up. But it's more of a basketball, university, wouldn't you say, Jason?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think I've always described it as like it's a basketball town. It's a football town, but the school is a university. It's a basketball school. They've done well. They almost knocked off Auburn in the first round in the tournament last year.
And that's what I was saying, because last year when New Mexico State was playing, now when I was there, Reggie Theus was actually the head basketball coach, and they made, they were still in the tournament. But last year, as you said, I mean, they had Auburn on the ropes. I mean, if Auburn wouldn't have hit those, 15 threes, it was incredible. I mean, Auburn's squad last year was remarkable, but that just shows you how good New Mexico State basketball was and is.
Yeah, they missed a three that would have given them the game, and they missed 3 free throws that would have tied it and sent it into overtime. So they definitely had their chances last year. They should be good again. So, their basketball team is more successful. But like I said, if the Aggies football team is playing well, like they did 2 years ago, the town does show up for it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, I guess. But it's definitely a brutal schedule this year they have.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for joining us today. Thanks, for
yeah, man.
Thanks for your time, and I really appreciate catching up with you. We go back a long ways. Las Cruces is a great city. I really enjoy the people there. I enjoy the food. It's always been a special place to me, and I enjoyed going to school down there. So, looking forward to New Mexico State and Alabama. I know it's a large spread, but, looking forward to the Aggies getting better and having them come out to see the pageantry of the SEC, because Tuscaloosa is also a very beautiful city that's also been great to us. So I appreciate it, Jason. Jason Groves, Las Cruces Sun News. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks.